Welcome back to XRP On Moon, the channel where we break down the biggest developments, hidden signals, and market-moving insights around XRP before the mainstream even catches on. Today's topic is not just another headline. It's something that could mark a turning point. XRP is showing signs that it is ready to go, and what we're seeing right now is quietly building behind the scenes, could be much bigger than most people realize. If you've been watching XRP for a while, you already know that when it moves, it doesn't move slowly, it explodes. And right now, multiple indicators are lining up in a way we haven't seen in a long time. Let's start with what's happening beneath the surface, because the real story is not just about price, it's about positioning. XRP has been consolidating for an extended period, and in the crypto world, long periods of consolidation often lead to explosive breakouts. This is not hype. This is a pattern that has repeated itself across multiple cycles. When an asset holds strong despite market uncertainty, it usually means accumulation is taking place. Smart money doesn't chase pumps. It builds positions quietly, patiently, and strategically. And right now, XRP is behaving exactly like an asset that is being accumulated rather than abandoned. Now, here's where things start to get interesting. Market sentiment around XRP has been shifting, but not in the way most retail investors expect. While the majority of the market remains distracted by trending coins and short-term gains, XRP has been building a foundation. This disconnect between price action and underlying developments often creates the biggest opportunities, because by the time the hype returns, the move is already well underway. That's why understanding these early signals is so important. You don't want to be reacting, you want to be positioned. Another key factor that cannot be ignored is the broader macro environment. The crypto market as a whole is entering a phase where liquidity, regulation, and institutional involvement are starting to align. XRP, more than many other assets, sits at the intersection of all three. Its use case in cross-border payments, its relationships with financial institutions, and its ongoing legal clarity journey all place it in a unique position. When the environment shifts toward real-world utility and compliance, XRP doesn't just benefit, it becomes a front runner. And let's talk about momentum, because momentum in crypto is everything. Right now, XRP is beginning to show early signs of renewed interest. Trading volume patterns, social engagement, and market structure are all hinting that something is building. But here's the catch, it's still early. The majority of retail investors are not fully aware of what's happening yet, and that's exactly what makes this phase so critical. Early phases are quiet, they're often ignored, and they don't feel exciting. But they are where the biggest gains are born. There's also a psychological element at play here. XRP has gone through a long period of frustration for many holders. Sideways movement, missed expectations, and constant comparison to other coins have tested patience. But historically, assets that shake out weak hands during long consolidations tend to reward those who remain. It's not about blind holding, it's about understanding the bigger picture. And right now, that bigger picture is starting to shift. What makes this moment different from previous ones is the convergence of factors. It's not just technical patterns or just fundamental developments, it's both happening at the same time. When technical strength meets fundamental momentum, the probability of a significant move increases dramatically. This is the kind of setup that experienced investors watch for, because it doesn't happen often. At the same time, we need to stay grounded. Being ready to go doesn't mean the move has already happened. It means the conditions are forming. And in markets, conditions are everything. Think of it like pressure building before an explosion. You don't always know the exact moment it will release, but you can see the signs that it's getting closer. That's exactly where XRP is right now, approaching a point where something has to give. And here's the part most people overlook: timing. The market doesn't reward those who arrive late. By the time headlines start screaming that XRP is pumping, the easy gains are usually already gone. That's why moments like this, when things are still relatively quiet but signals are aligning, are so valuable. It's about being early, not lucky. So as we move forward, the key question is not whether XRP will move, it's when and how strong that move could be. Because if the current setup plays out the way it has in previous cycles, we could be looking at a shift that catches a lot of people off guard. And in crypto, those are the moves that define portfolios. Now let's go deeper into the signals that are quietly building behind the scenes, because this is where things start to separate speculation from reality. What we're seeing right now with XRP is not just random market noise. It's a structured setup that experienced investors pay very close attention to. And one of the biggest indicators comes from market structure itself. XRP has been forming higher lows over time while maintaining a relatively stable resistance zone. This kind of compression is often referred to as a coiling effect, where price tightens into a range before making a decisive move. The tighter the coil, the more explosive the breakout tends to be. But here's what makes this even more compelling. This pattern is forming during a period where overall market conditions are stabilizing. In previous cycles, XRP's biggest moves didn't happen in isolation. They happened when the broader crypto market was transitioning from uncertainty into expansion. That transition phase is exactly where we are right now. Bitcoin dominance is fluctuating, liquidity is slowly returning, and all coins are beginning to show early signs of life. XRP, however, is not just following the market. It's setting up in a way that suggests it could lead. Another major signal comes from volume behavior. Unlike retail-driven spikes, which are usually sudden and emotional, institutional accumulation tends to show up as consistent, controlled volume over time. And that's exactly what XRP has been displaying. We're not seeing chaotic pumps and dumps. We're seeing steady participation that suggests calculated positioning. This type of activity often flies under the radar because it doesn't create immediate excitement, but it's one of the strongest indicators that something bigger is being prepared. At the same time, wallet activity is becoming increasingly interesting. Large holders, often referred to as whales, have been showing patterns that align with accumulation phases rather than distribution. Instead of moving large amounts of XRP to exchanges to sell, many of these wallets are either holding steady or increasing their positions. This matters because whales don't operate on emotion, they operate on strategy. When they accumulate, it's usually because they anticipate a future move that hasn't yet been priced in. And then there's the regulatory angle, which has always been a defining factor for XRP. While uncertainty has weighed on the asset in the past, the landscape is gradually shifting. Clarity, even if not fully complete, is improving. And in financial markets, clarity reduces risk. And when risk is reduced, capital flows in. XRP's unique position in this space means that any progress on the regulatory front doesn't just help. It amplifies confidence in a way that many other assets can't replicate. We also need to talk about utility, because this is where XRP stands apart. While many cryptocurrencies rely heavily on speculation and hype cycles, XRP has always been tied to a real-world use case: cross-border payments and financial infrastructure. As global finance continues to evolve, the demand for faster, cheaper, and more efficient systems is only increasing. XRP is not trying to find a use case, it already has one. And as adoption grows, that utility begins to translate into value. Now, here's something that most people overlook: timing alignment between fundamentals and technicals. In many cases, strong fundamentals exist without immediate price action, or strong price action happens without solid fundamentals. But when both align at the same time, that's when markets tend to move aggressively. Right now, XRP is showing early signs of that alignment. The fundamentals are strengthening, the technical structure is tightening, and market sentiment is beginning to shift all at once. There's also a noticeable change in narrative. For a long time, XRP was surrounded by doubt and skepticism, much of it driven by external factors. But narratives in crypto can change quickly, and when they do, they often flip from one extreme to another. What was once ignored can suddenly become the center of attention, and when that shift happens, it doesn't just bring in retail investors, it attracts institutional interest as well. That's when moves accelerate beyond expectations. But let's be clear, this is still the build-up phase. The breakout hasn't fully happened yet, and that's exactly why this moment matters. Markets reward anticipation, not reaction. By the time confirmation is obvious, the opportunity is often reduced. That's why understanding these signals now, before the crowd catches on, is so important. And perhaps the most important takeaway from all of this is that XRP is no longer just waiting, it's positioning. Every indicator we've discussed points toward preparation rather than stagnation. It's like watching a spring being compressed tighter and tighter, storing energy for a release that could come faster than most people expect. Now let's step into the bigger picture, because understanding that XRP is ready to go is only half the story. The real question is what happens if this setup actually plays out. How far can XRP realistically move, and why are some analysts quietly preparing for a scenario that could surprise the entire market? This is where things shift from early signals into potential outcomes, and it's important to approach this with both excitement and logic. First, we need to understand how XRP typically behaves during breakout cycles. Unlike many other assets that move in gradual steps, XRP has a history of making sudden, aggressive moves once key resistance levels are broken. These moves are often driven by a combination of FOMO, short liquidations, and rapid inflows of capital. When XRP starts trending, it doesn't usually give much time for hesitation. That's why early positioning becomes so critical, because once momentum kicks in, the pace can become overwhelming for those trying to enter late. Looking at previous cycles, XRP has delivered exponential gains in relatively short periods of time. But what's important here is not to blindly expect the same percentages. It's to understand the conditions that made those moves possible. Back then, XRP was driven heavily by retail hype and speculation. Today, the environment is evolving. There is a stronger focus on utility, institutional involvement, and regulatory clarity. This means that the next major move, if it happens, could be driven by a more sustainable foundation rather than pure hype. Now, here's where the conversation becomes really interesting. There are growing discussions around XRP potentially benefiting from large-scale financial integration. We're talking about the possibility of deeper connections with banking systems, payment providers, and even central bank frameworks. While not all of this is confirmed or fully implemented, the direction is clear. Blockchain technology is moving closer to traditional finance, and XRP is one of the few assets already positioned within that conversation. If that integration narrative continues to build, it changes how XRP is valued. Instead of being seen purely as a speculative asset, it begins to be viewed as infrastructure. And infrastructure assets are priced differently. They are not just traded, they are utilized. This shift in perception alone can have a massive impact on demand, especially from institutions that require both efficiency and compliance. From a price perspective, there are key psychological levels that the market tends to react to. Breaking above long-standing resistance zones often triggers a chain reaction. First comes the initial breakout, then confirmation, followed by acceleration as more participants enter the market. If XRP manages to break and hold above these critical levels, the move could extend much further than most people currently expect, not because of hype, but because of momentum feeding into itself. Another factor to consider is liquidity. In simple terms, liquidity determines how easily an asset can move. During periods of low liquidity, even moderate buying pressure can push prices up significantly. And when liquidity is combined with strong demand, the result can be explosive. XRP's current setup suggests that if a surge in demand arrives, the available supply at lower levels may not be enough to absorb it, leading to rapid price expansion. But we also need to address the role of market psychology. Right now, many investors are still cautious. They've seen false starts before, and that hesitation is understandable. However, markets often move when the majority least expects it. The longer an asset stays quiet while building strength, the more powerful the eventual breakout tends to be. It's a classic case of disbelief turning into acceptance, and then into excitement. There's also the possibility of a narrative-driven surge. In crypto, narratives can act as fuel for price movements. Whether it's institutional adoption, regulatory breakthroughs, or technological advancements, a strong narrative can bring attention and capital into an asset very quickly. XRP has multiple narratives forming at once, and if they align at the right time, the impact could be significant. At this stage, it's not about predicting an exact price. It's about recognizing the potential scale of the move. XRP doesn't need extreme conditions to perform well. It just needs the right combination of factors to align, and right now, those factors are starting to come together in a way that suggests something bigger could be on the horizon. However, it's important to stay balanced. Not every setup leads to a breakout, and not every breakout leads to a sustained rally. The market is dynamic and conditions can change. That's why awareness and preparation are key. You don't need to predict the future perfectly. You just need to recognize when the odds are shifting. And right now, the odds are beginning to tilt. Now let's shift our focus to something that most people tend to ignore when excitement starts building, and that's the risks, the delays, and the factors that could slow down or even temporarily invalidate this bullish setup for XRP. Because while everything we've discussed so far points toward a strong potential move, smart positioning is not just about understanding the upside. It's about being fully aware of what could go wrong. First, we need to talk about false breakouts. In the crypto market, not every breakout leads to a sustained rally. In fact, one of the most common traps is when price briefly moves above a key resistance level, creates excitement, pulls in new buyers, and then quickly reverses. This is often referred to as a fake out, and it's designed, whether intentionally or naturally by market mechanics, to shake out weak hands. XRP has experienced these types of moves in the past, and it's something that cannot be ignored. Just because price starts moving doesn't automatically mean the trend is confirmed. Another critical factor is overall market dependency. No matter how strong XRP's individual setup may look, it still operates within the broader crypto ecosystem. If the overall market faces a sudden downturn, whether due to macroeconomic pressure, liquidity tightening, or unexpected events, XRP is unlikely to move independently in a sustained way. Even the strongest assets tend to follow the general direction of the market, especially during periods of uncertainty. That's why it's important to watch not just XRP, but the entire market environment. Regulation, which we previously discussed as a potential advantage, can also act as a double-edged sword. While progress toward clarity is a positive sign, any unexpected developments or delays can create uncertainty. Markets react quickly to regulatory news, and even small changes in tone or direction can impact sentiment. XRP has already been heavily influenced by regulatory factors in the past, and that sensitivity still exists. So while the long-term outlook may be improving, the short-term path may not always be smooth. We also need to consider investor psychology at a deeper level. After a long period of consolidation, many holders become impatient. When price finally starts to move, there's often a rush to take profits early, especially from those who have been holding for a long time. This can create selling pressure that slows down the initial breakout. It's a natural reaction. People want to secure gains after waiting, but it can delay the kind of explosive move that many are expecting. Another overlooked risk is overhype. Ironically, too much excitement too early can actually work against a sustained rally. When social media becomes flooded with extreme price predictions and unrealistic expectations, it can attract short-term traders looking to capitalize on volatility rather than support a long-term trend. This type of activity can lead to sharp spikes, followed by equally sharp corrections, creating instability instead of steady growth. Liquidity conditions also play a major role on the downside, not just the upside. While low liquidity can accelerate price increases, it can also amplify declines. If selling pressure increases during a period of thin liquidity, price can drop faster than expected. This is why volatility cuts both ways. It creates opportunity, but it also increases risk. Timing is another challenge that many investors underestimate. Even if XRP is ready to go, that doesn't mean it will happen immediately. Markets can remain in a build-up phase longer than expected, testing patience and conviction. This is where many people make mistakes. They either enter too late out of fear of missing out, or they exit too early out of frustration. Understanding that timing is uncertain helps create a more disciplined approach. And then there's the factor of external shocks, events that no one can predict but can impact the market instantly, whether it's global economic news, sudden shifts in monetary policy, or unexpected developments in the crypto space. These events can disrupt even the strongest setups. XRP is not immune to these forces, and it's important to always keep that in mind. All of these risks don't mean that XRP won't move. They simply mean that the path forward may not be linear. There could be pullbacks, delays, and moments of doubt along the way, and that's completely normal. In fact, it's often these moments that strengthen the overall structure before a larger move. The key takeaway here is awareness. When you understand both the potential and the risks, you're in a much stronger position to navigate the market. You're not reacting emotionally, you're responding strategically, and that's what separates those who consistently succeed from those who get caught in the noise. Now let's bring everything together because at this point you've seen the full picture. XRP is showing signs of strength, the setup is building, the potential is there, but the path forward requires clarity, discipline, and the right mindset. This is where most people either make their best decisions or their biggest mistakes. The first thing you need to understand is that opportunities like this don't feel obvious in the moment. When XRP is quietly consolidating, when the signals are just starting to align, and when the majority of the market is still distracted elsewhere, that's when positioning matters the most. By the time everything looks confirmed, the market has usually already moved. That's why this phase right now is so critical. It's not about chasing hype. It's about recognizing structure before it becomes obvious. At the same time, smart positioning is not about going all in based on excitement. It's about having a plan, knowing where you stand, understanding your risk tolerance, and avoiding emotional decisions. Because when XRP does start moving, and if the setup we discussed plays out, it's going to test you in a different way. Rapid price movements can create both fear and greed at the same time. Prices go up and you wonder if it's too late. Prices pull back and you wonder if it's over. This emotional cycle is where most people lose their edge. What separates experienced investors from the crowd is not just knowledge, it's behavior. They don't react to every move. They don't get shaken out by short-term volatility. And most importantly, they don't let hype dictate their decisions. They understand that markets move in phases: accumulation, breakout, expansion, and eventually correction. Right now, XRP appears to be transitioning from accumulation toward a potential breakout phase. But even within that transition, there will be noise. Another key point to keep in mind is that no one can predict the exact outcome. You will hear price targets, timelines, and bold claims. But the reality is, the market doesn't follow anyone's script. What you can do, however, is prepare. You can stay informed, watch the signals, and make decisions based on logic rather than emotion. That alone puts you ahead of the majority. And let's talk about expectations, because this is where things often go wrong. It's easy to get caught up in extreme predictions, massive price targets, overnight success, life-changing gains in a matter of days. While big moves are possible in crypto, they rarely happen in a straight line. There are always pullbacks, consolidations, and moments that test conviction. Staying realistic doesn't reduce opportunity. It increases your ability to actually capture it. One of the most powerful advantages you can have right now is patience. In a fast-moving market, patience feels uncomfortable, but it's often what leads to the best outcomes. If XRP truly is building toward a larger move, there will be multiple stages along the way. You don't need to catch everything. You just need to stay aligned with the bigger picture. And here's something important to remember. This isn't just about XRP. It's about how you approach the market as a whole, the habits you build now, the way you manage risk, the discipline you maintain. These are the things that will determine your long-term success. XRP might be the opportunity in front of you today, but the mindset you develop will apply to every opportunity that comes after. As we close, take a step back and look at what we've covered. Strong technical structure, growing fundamental alignment, increasing attention, but also real risks and uncertainties. This is what a high potential setup looks like. Not guaranteed, not perfect, but full of possibility for those who approach it the right way. So whether you're already holding XRP, watching from the sidelines, or just starting to learn about this space, the key message is simple. Stay informed, stay disciplined, and don't let short-term noise distract you from long-term opportunity. And before we wrap up, a quick but important reminder, this content is for informational and educational purposes only. It is not financial advice. The crypto market is highly volatile, and you should always do your own research and consult with a qualified financial advisor before making any investment decisions. Never invest more than you can afford to lose, and always make decisions based on your own financial situation and risk tolerance. If you found value in this breakdown, make sure to stay connected with XRP On Moon, because we'll continue bringing you the insights that matter before they become headlines. This might be the calm before the storm. And if that's true, XRP's next move could be something the market won't ignore.